Hi, I'm Justin,
And I'm Waylon.
and we're going to talk today about a subject that usually gets me a little bit angry, and that would be the Red Dawn remake. Um, Waylon, I don't give me your impressions until the end of it, or don't give me a definitive if you liked the remake or not until the end. But it may have consequences on our friendship. I don't know. Um, So we both watched. I mean, I saw the remake in theaters. The original movie is like one of my all-time favorite movies. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember going to the video rental place and watching it with my dad. And it's weird because it's like my dad's a Republican, but he's not that I mean, he's not that stereotypical like military Republican type. It's almost like he's very like liberal in the family life, but politically he was a Republican type. And I mean, I have fond memories of watching this movie with him as a kid, and I loved this movie as a kid. And I mean, my opinion on the remake is pretty obvious from the start. It's horrible. I hate it. I guess we could start with just talking about the original movie. I don't think it was a blockbuster when it came out, but it was pretty good action movie, par for the time. And I think it came out at the right time. I mean, okay, for those that don't know, it's Red Dawn is about Soviet Union invading the United States, and it's about a group of teenagers, and it revolves around the teenagers and their freedom fighters, and they're fighting the occupation forces. And in the original, I believe it came out in 1984, it was obviously the Soviet Union and their allies like Cuba and Nicaragua. And, the movie set it up where, NATO kind of fell apart and the Soviets invaded. And it came out at the right time. I mean, it was kind of at the end of the Cold War, but I think it was at the right time. There was still a lot of, paranoia about that. And I mean, I remember a little bit about that. I don't know if you remember sort of the early, or the waning days of the Cold War, Waylon. Do you remember anything like that of it?
I remember it being on television a little bit as a kid, but I didn't really understand it at the time. Later on, I looked back and learned more about it and understood it better.
Yeah, I'm just... But, interesting, you and I and people born in our time period, it was kind of like between, I think it's 1980 and 1985 or something. We're actually our own separate generation. We're part of Generation Y, but we're actually called Generation Cold Y, or Early Y. Because we're the last generation that will remember the Cold War. And we also are we're a generation where we grew up in an age that wasn't, like, fully technological. I mean, not to say the 80s were technological, but, the whole social media, internet generation.
Right.
We're sort of the generation that kind of came in between where we're competent enough with electronics, but we can remember a time that it didn't, like, dominate our entire lives.
Right, we grew into the electrical technology age.
Yeah, the information age, I guess. Yeah, I mean, if the internet and electronics disappeared, I'd be upset and pissed off. But I think it would not be a fun time. But I think people like you and I could continue to function eventually. But I mean, millennials, I could just picture like curled up in a ball in the corner, like fetal position, crying.
Google! Yeah.
Siri! Not to say I wouldn't miss it, but it's just, I remember a time when it wasn't like that. And I do kind of remember the Cold War. I remember where I was when the Berlin Wall fell. I remember all those weird things. I did, like you said, I didn't quite understand it, but, I kind of knew what was going on. But anyways, not to go too much on a tangent. The original Red Dawn, like I said, I think it came out at the right time. I think it was a decent movie. And not only was it a movie, it was a piece of propaganda. And I mean, I've talked to people that were older at the time it came out, and they watched it, and they went straight from the theater to the recruiting office. So, I mean, a lot of people, when you think of propaganda, it gets a negative connotation. But propaganda can be bad, and propaganda can be good. And I think Red Dawn succeeds as being a propaganda film, as well as just a decent 80s action film, because it did tap into the paranoia of that time. So I guess that's really all I'm going to say about the original. I guess I'll go into the remake, and Waylon, feel free to jump in with comments if you agree and disagree on the certain points.
I will.
Okay, as for the remake, I guess I think it fails as an action movie. I'm not going to say it's a horrible movie, because I remember coming out of the theater and thinking, well, it's mediocre. It's not the worst. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen by far. But I don't think it's a great action movie. I think it's mediocre. I think it's forgettable. And I also don't think it's a good propaganda film. I mean, I remember as a kid watching the original and, like, you know, getting patriotic feelings and getting upset. I think people, and like I said earlier, people came out of the original and they would go straight to the recruiting office. I think people that come out of this movie forgot it in the next 10 minutes, you know, while they're having their dinner after the movie. I think the timing was wrong. It's not the same political landscape as it was back in the 80s. The whole enemy being North Korea is kind of stupid and ridiculous. Originally, we know it was China, which isn't as intimidating as the Soviet Union, but it made a hell of a lot more sense, and it was a hell of a lot more scary.
From the original to the new one, wasn't it Mexico that really invaded, and the Soviets were just kind of helping out?
No, the Soviets, when setting it up, Mexico fell to a socialist revolution, so they kind of became a Soviet client state, but it was really, I believe it was it was the Soviet Union, it was Nicaragua, oddly enough, and Cuba were the three main antagonists. But they did come up through Mexico because Mexico became kind of a client state, so they were able to send all their forces there and then move up. They came through Alaska, and then they came up through Mexico, and they took over like Arizona and Texas, and they moved up into Colorado, where the movie takes place in Colorado. Right. So that's kind of how they set it up. I believe.
And the newer one, though, I know Russia still has a part in it. So.
Yeah, they still have I mean, it's not the same. I'll get to that. Because I can overlook that part, but it's just on. I think the big thing that makes the original a better propaganda film, part of it is it was just way more believable. It's just stupid. I mean, North Korea, for all their craziness, there's no way they could take any, you know, they could probably barely take the South, let alone, you know, launch a major invasion of the United States. Even if you set things up, like, because the original set things up like NATO dissolved. The only member of NATO was the United Kingdom, I think, and you know, there were bad harvests in the Soviet Union, which forced them to be more militaristic. But even if you set it up, I mean, even the entire population of North Korea is dwarfed by our population. I don't know if they have enough people to garrison like Texas or California. It's just...
Well, and the new one, I believe it was just Washington and Oregon they had a piece of.
They said something else about, like, because didn't their special forces guys came up from Arizona where, like, they were fighting? I think they were into California, too. I'm not 100%. I know you're right about the Russians.
Right.
Like I said, I can just overlook it. I can think in my mind, well, it's because they don't specifically state it, I can always just make it up. And I'd be like, well, it's the Chinese, the Russians, and the North Koreans. And the movie I'm watching is just taking part in a little part of the United States the North Koreans happen to be involved in. So, I mean, right. I can kind of overlook that. I still think it's stupid. It's a shame that they had to change it from China to North Korea, because it was pretty much compromising the artistic view of the movie just to pander to... I mean, it was a good business move. You want to get money from China. China's a big thing. You didn't see this in the 80s because the Soviets didn't buy they didn't go see American movies in theaters. There wasn't money to be made. But now Chinese movie goers, they're going to watch this. So, of course, American movie makers are going to want to pander to them, and they're going to compromise their... artistic vision on a movie because they want it to do well in China, where they're going to make money hand over fist. And I mean, it's a shame that it had to be compromised like that, but it wasn't set up well. A lot of it comes back to believability. I remember in the original, like, you saw a lot more battle. I don't even know if there were any battle scenes in the remake, except the beginning where the planes are coming in and there's an F-16 and there's a slight aerial battle. But I remember the original, they would go through, like, battlefields where there's burnt out tanks. There were gunfights with helicopters would come in, and they went to the battlefront at one point. It set it up a lot more. It was a lot more believable. It was just a lot cooler to kind of you got a bigger picture of things in the original that I think really lacked in the remake. Also, there's the super weapon, which it's another thing. It makes it even, like, they had to throw in that, we have the North Koreans have an EMP weapon, because it really, I think even in the remake, there's a part where the character says, like, it's the North Koreans, this doesn't make sense. And it was like, because they couldn't do it, but I guess, the Russians are helping them, plus they had to throw in this stupid super weapon that the North Koreans had in an attempt, like a half-assed attempt to make it more realistic.
To make it believable, yeah.
Yeah, which even then is still pretty stupid. It just became this MacGuffin where they had to, like... The original was about the freedom fighting, and now in this one it's like any boring action movie. It's like this group and they have to get this item to prevent this.
It made it campy almost.
Yeah, in a bad way. It was so unforgettable. You have to get the EMP weapon in a briefcase. It was just dumb. And we're talking about things I don't like about it. Oh god.
The weapon wasn't in the briefcase. That was a radio that they used to communicate.
Okay.
That wasn't the weapon itself.
But that was just what they used to, like, trigger it or whatever?
No, that's what they used to communicate. The EMP, that weapon was used and just fried all the grid, Mm-hmm. It would take a long time to rebuild. Which is plausible, actually.
Yeah, it's a plausible weapon, but, I mean, I would assume we'd probably have that kind of weapon before they would, or the retaliation. I mean... I just can't see it happening. It's just... I mean, that F-16 at the beginning was still flying around and fighting, and this is supposedly after the EMP weapon went off. I mean, where was everybody else? I mean, even if you take out modern equipment, there's almost enough, American forces, Joe and Billy Bob with shotguns to just overwhelm.
Right.
It's just...
Which is actually kind of the base of the movie, though.
Yeah, it just... And now this is the stupidest thing because it's really tiny, but I must talk about it because I hate it. Oh, the end. Why did they have a Mustang was it a Gatling gun on it?
Oh,
do you remember that?
Yeah.
Have you ever watched the news and seen like ISIS fighters or terrorist fighters or even like legitimate armies that have Mustangs with guns mounted on them?
It's an impractical vehicle.
It's very impractical. I love Mustangs because I've been driving one for like 15 years now, but for being an off-road combat vehicle, it's ridiculous. Like, you're going to tell me that they're in, Washington or Oregon, and there's not a bunch of freaking pickup trucks sitting around that you can just mount a gun on the back? No, you got to cut the top off a Mustang, somehow mount a machine gun, and then really awkwardly sit in it and hope you don't get bogged down when they're driving off. It's just stupid. And I know what it is. It's just product placement. I get it. It's product placement. But it's another crappy, unbelievable thing that they throw in to make the movie that throws you out of the movie. It makes it a boring, mediocre action movie. Whereas I think the original was believable, it was legitimate, it was a good propaganda movie, and it came out at the right time. And this movie didn't. I could almost argue that maybe this movie, if it came out right now, would be a little bit better, because with all the crap going on with Russia now, kind of being more militarily assertive, and with China and the South China Sea thing, it makes a little bit more sense now, but...
Also, the North Korea hacking and stuff, that's kind of part of it, too.
Yeah, I think it would make a little more sense right now, rather than when it came out, 4 or 5 years ago? 3 years? I don't know, but it's still stupid.
2012.
Okay, it's still dumb. It still wouldn't work. Other things, it just wasn't as emotionally impacting as I've always recalled scenes from the original that were really good. And in any movie, I thought they were really good. Even if you take the original and consider it just like, it's an 80s action movie, it had some really impacting scenes. It had the one where their friend went into town, and this was their friend that they grew up with, and he was in their resistance group with them, and he goes into town because he's a stupid kid and he wants to see his family. And the Soviets, the KGB, capture him, and they put a tracking device in him. And eventually they send troops out, and they ambush the troops that are sent out and kill him, and they find out that their friend has a tracking device in him, and it's like, what do we do? He's our best friend. There's this emotional scene where he's tied up with a Soviet soldier, a Russian soldier, and they shoot him. They have to kill him. Like, Swayze's character is gonna shoot him, but then he's like, I can't do it. He's my friend. I can't. And then the other kid's like, just takes an AK and is like, and blows him away. But that's more emotionally impacting probably right there than any scene in the remake. Even there's like some boring cookie cutter scene where he's like, saves his girlfriend from the Russians or something.
Well, here's what I have to say about that is there wasn't as well a character development. You never got emotionally attached to any character that much. the main character, who would have been Swayze, I think he was called Jed, got shot in the head, right before he was about to get laid, That was like the big scene,
Oh, don't forget Thor's in it.
Yeah, Thor. Yeah.
What's funny is the one girl...
Thor, yeah.
Remember, there was a girl on... I'll leave names out, but I talked to someone at some point, and they were like, this movie's great. And I was like, no, it's not. Why is this great? Oh, Thor's in it, or whatever. It's Chris Hemsworth or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. If you're a girl, maybe he's a sexy guy, but it's still a shit movie. It's like, really what you're watching is him making out with a turd. I mean, just watch a good movie with him in it, or watch some fake porn with him where they stick his face on a model or something. Don't watch Red Dawn and say it's a good movie because it has a guy in it that you think is attractive. It's still him making out with a turd, really. It's just, but yeah, that's a good point. The character development was nowhere. I mean, it wasn't very good, and there was also like another scene. You remember in the original the whole like firing squad scene where they round up some of the townspeople and they line them up and they have the Soviet soldiers and the tanks, the machine gun guys, and they're like, well, this is what happens when there's partisan things going on, and they start singing the national anthem and they blow them away. They all get gunned down in a firing squad, and I remember as a kid not really even knowing what was going on. That was like an emotionally impacting scene, and I could see that scene right there being the reason some people would just be like, yeah, I'm joining up. I'm joining the middle. I mean, that right there was a kick-ass propaganda scene. Really, it was a good scene.
Yeah, and they try to replicate that in the movie where they put that one woman out, but instead of making it about patriotism, the Wolverines came in and actually rescued her, and then everyone starts chanting Wolverines instead of America.
Yeah, it's
so like, right there, it's not patriotic.
It's like they couldn't go the distance. Like, sometimes dark things have to happen. And I mean, that's the original. It wasn't just an action movie where you got these, the Wolverines and you had that in the original. Obviously you had scenes where they're liberating that concentration camp and attacking the convoy where they're, it's a good action scene where they're kicking ass. But you also had the opposite of that. Like, the towns, this is the consequence of that. Now the Soviets, they're going to kill townspeople, as a way to try to put down this partisan, attacks. And the remake didn't come anywhere near doing that kind of thing. It was like it was afraid to, or whatever, but it just ended up being
PC.
It was PC. It was very generic, and it was, we're the heroes, and nothing bad happens because we saved the day in the nick of time. And again, it made it unbelievable. It made it far less realistic and I was far less emotionally invested in the remake.
Although they did kill off a lot of the Wolverines. Only 2 of them made it.
I don't even remember. You watched this last night.
Right.
I was gonna watch the remake for this. I watched the original just because it happened to be on TV, and I was like, oh, this is a pleasant happenstance. And I watched the original, but I couldn't. I mean, the remake wasn't on Netflix and Hulu, and I just wasn't gonna spend money or time rewatching it. So they're both fresh in your mind. You watched both in the past 2 weeks, right?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have anything else to add? I mean, I think I vented. I think I've hit all my points.
Well, the tracking scene was reduplicated in the...
Was it? I don't remember.
Yeah, well, this is why you were supposed to watch it. That was your homework assignment.
I just...
Shame on you, Justin.
I know. It wouldn't have changed my opinion.
But one of the Russian insurgent experts stabbed him.
The guy in the blue beret?
Yeah.
I remember that.
He stabbed him, but it was a tracking, shiv thing. It wasn't a knife cut. Mm-hmm. And then they left him on the side of the road, armed to the teeth, ready to fight to the death while they drove off and escaped. So they kind of abandoned their friend.
Okay, I kind of remember that.
Yeah.
Even
so
then,
it wasn't as dramatic.
I was going to say, even then, doesn't that seem a little artificial rather than...
Right. It's like, oh, I'm going to die, for you guys,
Like... yeah, that's right. They didn't even... I mean, it was nothing like the original where they had this horrible choice. Well, they let their friend go and, risk him feeding them more information. What do you do? If you not punish him, and then others might get the idea to go into town and kill him.
He didn't go into town. They were on the mission. He got caught escaping.
Yeah, that's not as cool.
Yeah,
How do the rest of them just die in certain ways?
They were in the cave and they were bombed and it caved in a little bit and killed 2 of them there. Let's see. Like I said, Thor got shot in the head, just sniped because of the tracking device. Actually, there was the one kid, he went after the girl on the bus, and one of Gary, I think his name was, went out to help him and got shot and killed while trying to go off mission, which was a big no-no. The father died right away. In the beginning.
I remember. I mean, that might be the only scene that even comes close to being emotionally impacting as the original. But even then, it wasn't wonderful. It wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't great.
Well, the one guy's father got shot and killed while the other guy's father is helping the other people, you know?
Right.
And he appears later on. And
well, I don't remember. Was there, in your opinion, I mean, we've already established the character development in the original was better, but was there any character development for any of the bad guys? Because I remember in the original there was that one, I don't ever know, I think he's Russian, but he seems like he's Nicaraguan or Cuban or something, but he was like Colonel Bella or Colonel Vey. He was like the main kind of balding guy in the main. They kind of did a good character development with him, and like even at the end where Swayze, everyone, a lot of Wolverines are dead, and Swayze in the other, was it Swayze and Sheen that went into town? I can't remember for some, but they go into town at the end and they blow shit up, and his friend's shot and he's carrying him away, and then that Colonel Vega comes out and he's gonna shoot him, but then he's like, it was like this emotional scene where he just lets him go because it's just. It wasn't right away too. It was building up because they would like have scenes with him and he's like writing letters to his wife, and it's just the war isn't how it's supposed to be, and it's a lie, and it's the horrors of war, and it kind of wears on him, and he wants to go home and he wants to just quit. And I mean, did they have any development in the remake? I said, I don't remember that one.
That's why the original was better, because it actually gave the perspective of the pain of trying to invade on the enemy too, It's like, this isn't your place to, you're out of place. This is just a place to you. You want to go home, and there's these people that are just terrorizing you,
Yeah, like at the beginning, I even remember the beginning with they're in the woods before they start doing a resistance movement, and the Soviet guys come up as they're on like R&R.
Yeah, they're sightseeing, and they're on the hillside there with guns and stuff, and all of a sudden they get spotted and just blast him down.
Mm-hmm. And there's the one kid, he's probably like in his early 20s, and he's in the car, and Swayze's like there with the gun, and there's this couple moments where he doesn't know if he should shoot him or not, and he just kind of turns away, and you hear the gunshot, and I mean, just little moments like that make it better.
Now they tried to do it, replicating it from because they were brothers in the newer one. I forget their names. I'm not good with names, but they have this big speech about, make it hard for them, make them want to leave, blah, blah, blah. Make them pay for, staying here. And it only developed from one side, so there wasn't that conflict there. That's why it never developed any characters, because there wasn't conflict. But Chang or something like that, there was one Asian guy.
Krang
or something like that.
Yeah, we could just call him Krang.
That was the antagonist, militant character against him that they fought, and he eventually kills with his dad's gun, and
of course,
because he's the one who killed his father.
Was there? So. I don't remember it all the way. I remember the end where they're sneaking into that headquarters to fight Krang. Was there martial arts fighting? Did Krang? I can't remember, but I want to say because he was Asian, was he doing martial arts moves against them?
It was combat moves. It wasn't pure martial arts. It didn't go that cliche. But one scene I actually did like, because I just found it funny, is the two guys ran and jumped onto the top of the headquarters to get in. And the two Marines were behind them, like, crap, now we're going to have to jump too. And they jumped, down there, and then all of a sudden the other Wolverines throw a rope down and zip line down. Like, these big militant Marines are like, oh, shit. I found that funny. That was a funny scene,
Even like I don't know. I even like the I guess the two Marine guys were kind of like what stand-ins for the one guy, the pilot from the original.
Yeah, actually, I think there was 3. One of them got killed though.
Because I remember the guy in the original. He was like a pilot and he got shot. Even there were little cool things. Like one of the cool things I remember, he's laying there and he just ejected, and the girl comes over and she's like, "You a commie?" And he's like, "No." And she's like, "What's the capital of Texas?" And he says the correct answer is like San Antonio. And she's like, "Wrong, it's Houston." And it's just funny because he's the one that's right and she's wrong. But it makes sense because, you know, she's just some teenager and she what does she care about geography?
Right.
But, I don't know. Do you have any other points before I ask your final verdict?
No, I think I said all I needed to say.
Okay,
there was no scene where they pissed in a radiator, though.
No.
That disappointed me.
And there was no Patrick Swayze.
That
right there it can't be as good because there's no Patrick Swayze. But okay, I mean, I probably made it extremely obvious that I do not like the remake. I do hate it, but I don't, because I don't think it's like one of the worst movies, but it's just mediocre. It's just really forgettable. And on its own, as an action movie from 2013 or whatever, it's mediocre. It's forgettable, but it's like, okay, it's like a popcorn action flick. It's stupid. But when you compare it to the original, in my opinion, it's terrible. It's a terrible remake, and I think it's a terrible propaganda film. And in that sense, it's a bad movie. But now, I think I might have a good idea. I was a little bit worried, but now I've got to ask, what was your opinion on the original and the remake?
Well, on a remake scale, it is horrible. Movie standalone, I could watch it 6 out of 10, you know. It wasn't horrible to watch. But I watch a lot of movies, and some of them are way worse than that.
Right.
So that's kind of my scale there, but the original's easily 8 out of 10, you know.
So you kind of think, like the same as I do, that the original is a good movie. The remake is not okay. The remake on its own is kind of mediocre, but it's not horrible. But as a remake, it's a bad movie compared.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Cool. I was like, I know Waylon has taste. I know he likes some really weird films, but he's got to have good taste. I know he cannot not see this.
And you know, I don't like older movies as much, and I actually enjoyed watching the original more than I watched the remake. So
okay,
yeah,
well,
right there.
That's good. I am relieved, and you have restored my faith in your movie watchingness and your opinions on movies. You are a scholar and a gentleman.
Why, thank you.
Yes.
I'm also a spy master.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, well, I guess that's all for our conversation on Red Dawn and the remake of Red Dawn. So we thank you for listening, and thanks for stopping by.
Spy!